You fuel your truck with premium gas, change the oil on schedule, and check the tires before every trip. What about your own body, the one machine you depend on to provide for your family? Dylon Koch from Working Athlete learned the hard way what dehydration can do to your mind and muscles. Now he helps thousands of field workers avoid the mistakes that can cost lives.
Whether you're Tom Brady or you're Tom climbing a utility pole, your body breaks down, that's your moneymaker.
If you've ever grabbed 2 Monsters and a bag of Funyuns on the way to work, this episode could change how long and how strong you last on the job. Dr. Kevin here, and I just want to personally thank you for being a part of this community. It means the world to us, and without you, we wouldn't exist. The only favor that I will ever ask is that you like or subscribe to the Work Ready podcast, as this ensures that we can continue to grow this community and bring these amazing guests and conversations to you each week. Thank you so much. Now, let's get to work. Hello and welcome to the Work Ready podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kevin Rindal. So happy to be here with Dylon Koch from Working Athlete. Dylon, it's so good to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us. We first got to know each other through the introduction from Paul Salgado and Raul Gardado at the Power Element podcast. And Paul was like, dude, you've got to connect with Dylon. He's such a good guy. And we immediately hit it off. And one thing that I've just so appreciated about you is you're an educator. And every time I've seen you ever connect with people, it's always about educating them, bringing value to them. And so I've always really appreciated that about you.
Absolutely.
Well, we're really excited to hear your story, also hear about your background in hydration, nutrition, heat safety. And I think our listeners will really enjoy learning some of the things that you have to share today. And yeah, just hearing some of your personal background on things that you do. You've been an athlete your whole life. You're working with industrial workers and industrial athletes, and so yeah, really excited for the conversation. But one thing that I love about you, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners can relate to this. You started working with your hands at the age of about 6 years old, with your dad owning a landscaping business. So tell us a little bit more about your growing up and how that influences what you do today.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's part of you could say my story or upbringing that I absolutely cherish. And it's one of those things that, in the moment, you don't realize how many lessons you're learning that are lifelong lessons. And being able to share that in the blue collar, hands-on, manual labor space is amazing. But then doing it with your father and your dad is even better. So, my dad is a Marine. He got out of the Marine Corps after Desert Storm, and he quickly started, he had nothing. Got out of the Marine Corps and had nothing. So he took what was ever in the bank and went and bought a mower and a weed eater and started his business. And, essentially was knocking on doors, and 30 years later, he just retired. He sold his company. And but in the earlier stages of his career, it was myself and my brother that were his helpers. We were the cheapest labor around, and he was able to teach us his boys some lessons about the value of the dollar and hard work. And this was in the Valley of Phoenix, so it was hot. I mean, I looked at the weather in Phoenix today. It's a high of 120. So that's not even real feel. So I just learned so much about how your body responds physiologically, mental readiness. And in those moments, it's so difficult to understand the impact of heat and hydration and fluid balance on cognitive ability and decision making and your body working. And at the age of 6, 7, 8, all the way through high school, I didn't think of it because I was young. I was resilient and I could handle a lot, right? But then, actually, I won't get to that yet, but I did that for a while, right? And I was also an athlete. So our family, we revolved around sports in a lot of ways. And, I was blessed enough to play baseball all the way through college. and then continued my education, as you said, in sport and fitness administration, and then was in strength conditioning for athletes, professional, collegiate, high school, in their off season, and and then jumped over to corporate wellness in the white collar space, and it's just really shaped me into being able to help people as an industrial athlete, right, as a working athlete, to help them understand that how you take care of your number one machine, which is your body, it impacts so much, not just safety and performance, but quality of life. And that's what I'm passionate about. I like to hunt, I like to fish, I like to do physical, active things. I've got two daughters, and I want to be able to be physical. And in order to do that, you have to take care of your body. And I think that's what's so impactful with what Vamosity's talking about as well. This is amazing. Just being work ready, workforce readiness. I mean, this is very cool to see this shift in people's mindsets, paying attention to these topics.
I love that. So much that I want to dive into about your background. Before we do, what is your definition of an industrial athlete or a working athlete? I think you guys have like the best name out there when it comes to company working athlete. But yeah, what does that mean to you, and what do you see the workforce doing that is athletic in nature?
Yeah, I mean, the reason why, I think working athlete is so relatable is because a lot of blue collar or tradesmen out there in general were former athletes. A lot of them are, they're gritty, they're kind of rough around the edges a lot of times. They have this toughness and grit that a lot of people in society don't have. And that's just because a lot of times through their life, they grew up blue collar. They grew up with their, loved ones working in trades or being, working long shifts or, with their back up against the wall, right? And that naturally establishes grit. And I believe that, being involved in sports athletics for most of all my life, up until the age of probably 25, 26 years old, I was highly involved with sports, and then jumping over to the blue collar or outside work, I guess you could say. It doesn't even need to be outside. There's inside industrial athletes as well. It's just amazing how relatable and how physically and mentally demanding an industrial athlete is demanded. I mean, very similar to a sports athlete. We always say sports athletes only compete on average like 30 minutes a game on average. Football plays are on average like 4 seconds long or something, right? And it's these short bursts, high impact. So it is a completely different energy resource that they're pulling from in general. But also, people don't understand the physical demand and mental demand in blue collar or trade work, and it's prolonged over a whole day, right? The mental demand and physical demand. You're an athlete, whether you believe it or not. You're an athlete, so you've got to be resilient and you've got to be able to adapt to the situation that you're in. And I believe that's what creates an athlete, is the adaptability, to look at your environment and make sure that you're building in capacity or margin to perform strong or safe.
Absolutely. Yeah, tell us a little bit more about your sporting career. You played baseball, football. Love to hear a little bit more about that. Some of the highs and the lows of playing sports.
Yeah, no, I mean, my dad's a lifelong coach. He coached my team, my brother's teams, not all of them. But then he was a semi-pro coach. He was a collegiate coach, high school coach. He still coaches high school football. He can't give it up. But it involved us in sports naturally because I would either go to practice and just be around the game, and then I just fell in love with Sandlot. So I wanted to be Benny the Jet Rodriguez my whole life. So I was I was playing baseball, and I was lucky enough to play baseball all the way through college. But I was a football guy at heart, an absolute football player that was playing baseball. I had probably more recruiting opportunities for football than I did baseball, but I just unfortunately had some nerve issues going on in my neck. I guess that's what happens when you're playing middle linebacker at 185 pounds, you know. So I just played like I was 220, so I had a lot of banging of heads and necks, and I just had some nerve issues that prevented me from maybe expanding that career or prolonging that career. It would have been done at college anyways. I mean, I'm only 5'10", so I'm like, I probably wasn't fast enough to play past college in football, but I feel like I could have had a good career in college. But I had to make a business decision and understand that at the end of the day, I wanted the support for my schooling, and baseball was going to give me that opportunity because I felt like I could do it longer, which is directly in line with, you know, industrial work, right? Because pain tolerance and your ability to stay focused on the job, and playing injured, whether it be in the industrial field or on the sports field, you can't cut in physically or mentally if you're always in pain. And I was experiencing that at too young of a time in my career. But luckily, as I mentioned, I got to play baseball. I was recruited for baseball. Played for 5 years in college, and it allowed me to finish my schooling and stay involved in athletics, which was fantastic. But yeah, I mean, still to this day, I still help athletes on the side just because I can't get away from it. The coaching runs thick in my blood, and I still help athletes here around town to increase their performance. So it's never going to go away.
Awesome. I love the Sandlot reference, Benny the Jet Rodriguez. We just had 4th of July. Every 4th of July, I have to listen to or watch that scene, America the
Oh,
Beautiful, with Ray Charles singing and the fireworks going off. I think that's one of my favorite clips in movies. But yeah, relate to you 100%. I was a 185-pound middle linebacker who was playing way above my weight, and multiple brachial plexus injuries, concussions kept me from playing football at the next level. But at the same time, it's like one of those things that motivates you. I don't think I would have gone into sports medicine without that experience, because part of my journey was overcoming those injuries and figuring out, how do I rehab this? How do I,
yeah.
continue on? Because I mean, constant numbness and tingling in my right hand for years. But it's those experiences that definitely impact things and influence, who we are today.
Velocity is more than training. It's a safety and readiness platform trusted by companies to keep their field professionals strong, healthy, and ready for the job. Now we're launching something new, the Work Ready Community. It's the first online community built exclusively for field employees, a place to connect, learn, and lead the future of our industry. Join us and be part of the movement.
I do want to, I love that idea on the coach aspect, and I want to double click on that, because when you go out and you meet with, let's say, utility company or a construction company, I mean, you're educating folks on hydration, and you're not just saying, drink this, drink that, do this, do that. It's like, here's the why. Can you explain a little bit more about your style with education and coaching, and why you found that to be effective when it comes to connecting with frontline workers?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm jumping ahead, but I know that we were going to, discuss my favorite podcasts or books. So I'll save that for kind of later. But I know that one of the things that I believe is most important is connecting with people, and that it was my high school football coach that instilled that in my brain, and that was, you have to show you care before you critique somebody. And as I mentioned, I was involved in sports my whole life until post college, and and then I jumped over to this white collar corporate wellness role, and that was a demographic that I've never dealt with, and it was a challenge to communicate and connect with these people. Right, I went from having I went from trying to max out a power clean to trying to get people to get out of their chairs to get a healthy snack out of the break room, right? And that was a challenge for me. But I believe that my background in coaching, it helped me adapt quickly and help understand what intrinsically and extrinsically motivated that demographic, because they weren't motivated as the same way as sports athletes were, right? It was a completely different motivation and coaching strategy. And as you mentioned, yeah, I mean, in what I do, we're in the I guess you can say business of electrolyte support, but really we're in the business of helping people out. I mean, that's what we do. We go in and we train on, as you mentioned, heat illness and dehydration, but we open and widen that scope so much more, because people don't understand that your fluid balance impacts your mental health, your musculoskeletal injury prevention, your brain fog, right? Your cognitive ability, your healthy aging. Like, it has so much impact. And so when we come in and coach and train, at first, when I first got in this, I walked into a room of like 250 linemen, and I swear those guys were like, okay, who the hell is this guy? You know, I was way too technical, didn't talk to them the right way. And what I learned was, okay, I have to do a better job relating to who I'm talking to. And any good coach will tell you that that's what you have to do. You have to find a way to motivate that person. It's your job to do it. And, so I had to change kind of the way I approached this demographic. And it's one of those things where that's when we really started to lean on the relation of sports athletes and industrial athletes, because your body's your moneymaker. Whether you're Tom Brady or you're Tom climbing a utility pole, it doesn't matter. Your body breaks down, that's your moneymaker. And without it performing at the highest level, you don't get to provide. And that motivated a lot of this demographic, and we kind of leaned on that and hooked into that. And it was one of those things where, we became the subject matter experts on, yes, heat illness and hydration, but really in general, it was just building a physically resilient workforce, through high quality nutrition and hydration programming. And, we take on that. We don't take that lightly, because it's so preventable. Heat illness and dehydration is such a preventable thing. And now that we understand that it's the root cause of a lot of other incidents, people are starting to open their eyes to it a little more.
Yeah. No, I love that. One of the things that I've found just so interesting is that when you talk to people about things like hydration and nutrition, exactly what you're talking about, people are like, oh man, another safety initiative, another safety talk. It's like, do we really have to do this? But what I find fascinating is, a lot of the men and women out there, I mean, they're driving nice trucks. They are putting like high quality premium fuel in these vehicles. They're doing all kinds of stuff to make sure that they're running in tip-top shape. But then when it comes to, like you said, their moneymaker, their most important asset, it's like there's not a ton of thought or even education to people in terms of like why you choose this over that. Can you maybe share with us some of the most common misconceptions that you hear related to hydration, nutrition, and just fueling your body for performance?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Like, as cliche as that is, with hydration, it is so easy. I do it. I'm involved in hydration for a living. That's how we put food on the table for my family. And there's days where I don't take ownership to my hydration protocol, right? And then all of a sudden, you start to feel or see the symptoms, and you're like, wow, okay, that's so easy for you to forget. And hydration, in my opinion, is one of the most neglected things, and we know that. I mean, about 70% of Americans are chronically dehydrated. You're not getting enough water every day. And one of the things that we can focus on is having a plan. And it's such a simple fix, just to make sure you have, a 20 to 28 ounce hydration, next to your bed. So, whenever you wake up at night or in the morning, and that little thought comes in your mind like, oh, I'm thirsty, and then it's like, oh, well, I'm rushing for work, and then it's like, oh, I got to grab a bar, and next thing you know, you don't have any water, and you're tired because maybe you didn't have a nutritionally dense or sound diet the day before, and now now you're reaching for a canned energy drink or a 20-ounce coffee, which there's nothing wrong with coffee. It's the most consumed beverage in the world, probably. And caffeine, there's so many benefits to natural caffeine in your diet at healthy doses, but we need to make sure that we're kickstarting our system with water first thing in the morning. So our challenge is always establish a hydration plan. And if you follow through with it, you're naturally going to feel better, most importantly, but you're going to perform stronger and safer as well, naturally, because your body's 80% water. Rather than running on fumes all day, you can have a full tank and make sure that we're firing on all cylinders. So developing a pre, intra, and post hydration plan is probably, if I had to guess, the biggest issue with blue collar hydration. It's just because, as I mentioned, you don't plan, and then you run to QT and get 2 monsters and a couple tornadoes and a bag of Funyuns, and you think that you're good to go for the day. And you do that time and time and time again, it starts to compound, and things catch up to you. You hear it all the time. I hear it all the time from guys in these trades and gals in these trades that are like, man, I just wish I would have paid attention to these things a little bit more, because people don't understand inflammation. They don't understand how your body responds to this gunk you're putting in your body. And then you have a job that demands so much out of you physically and mentally. And we don't ever refuel properly. So the biggest misconception, in my opinion, is not having a pre, intra, and post hydration plan.
Yeah. And one of the things I've heard you say several times is the water you drink today is the water you'll have for tomorrow. So thinking about even hydration the night before, if you know that it's going to be, extra hot tomorrow, you're going to be physically active the next day. Can you talk a little bit more about that and maybe some recommendations for the night before and then first thing in the morning?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we like to say you can only work tomorrow as much as you recover today. And really, the cliche terminology that's used is hydration starts at home, right? Everybody prints them out and puts them on posters in the break rooms, and but what does that really mean and why? Why does hydration start at home? We've heard it 1,000 times, but yet we still have people falling out all the time. And the reality of it is just because people don't really understand that, as we mentioned, your muscle tissue is 80% water. Your brain's 80% water, your lungs, your heart, your blood, everything's water. And if we don't pay attention to it, how do we expect it to improve, right? We always say that what you pay attention to improves. And one of the things that you can do very, very simple is, as I mentioned, 10 to 20 ounces of water within the first hour of waking up. And then at the end of your day, if you're going to be having a few cocktails, I know blue collar culture is a lot of people drink, and that's just one of those things that culturally, that's just kind of what has taken hold, I guess you can say. And it's something that we don't tell people how to live their lives or anything at all. We just say, hey, why don't we compound it with some good? Let's compound it and complement it with some water in there, because alcohol is a natural diuretic, the caffeine's a diuretic, and then most people, because of that, they don't sleep well, right? They've got increased cortisol, which is causing poor sleep cycles, and now they're always in their fight or flight mode. And that's another big problem with energy drink consumption, is it actually can increase your cortisol levels, which in my opinion is a big root cause of mental health in blue collar trades, because you're never shutting off. You don't ever shut off. And we're marketed and commercialized into believing you have to drink 2 to 3 monsters or canned energy drinks a day. You have to do it. And unfortunately, the side effect of that is just completely bashing your natural adrenaline production, your adrenal glands, and in turn, in response, as we mentioned, we live in a overproduction of cortisol society, and I truly believe that that has a lot to do with mental health in the trades. I know I kind of went off a tangent there, but at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we have that 10 to 20 ounces of water first thing, and then after work, challenge yourself to do about a bottle of water an hour, because if you aren't saturating your cells at the cellular level constantly and consistently, you're not going to get true cellular hydration, which means you're going to be behind the 8 ball in the morning. And actually, to piggyback off of that, the importance of that is because at night, unless you're hooked up to an IV or have a Camelback on your back, you're losing fluid all night, right? That's why when you wake up, you're 2 to 3 pounds lighter every day, because you're respirating, you're sweating, you're breathing, you got all this vapor coming out, and then you get up to use the restroom. And so now you wake up way behind. And then if you compound that with the night before you were drinking alcohol and didn't have enough water, now you've probably 5x'd the amount of fluid you've just excreted, right? And now you've got to go to work and perform safely. And then you think that that's not going to have a prolonging effect on your body and your mind for a career in a trade. Unfortunately, I think that's why the trades are riddled with some of the issues that they have. Is just because we aren't paying attention to the things that we need to. So yeah, I would just say that that pre and post hydration is so key.
Yeah. And, I think one thing that's really helpful is you go to any operations room, safety room, restroom at a facility, and it's like they have P charts, and you can look at the color of your urine and understand like where you're at from a dehydration perspective, or they talk about people, paying attention to the thirst reflex and response. Those are both great guidelines, but if you're having like excessively yellow urine, you're thirsty, you're already behind the 8 ball. Can you expand on that a little bit more? Because those are both lagging indicators that you're already dehydrated.
Yeah, you hit it on the head. Those are both lagging indicators that, unfortunately, your brain and your cognitive ability and capacity has already gone through the phase of heat illness. By the time you realize your P's darkening, or even you begin to lose extremity response, right? Your brain's already gone, which in my opinion is what is most scary about heat illness and dehydration and heat stress, because you may have somebody that unfortunately goes through a fall, right? Or a slip or a trip that results in a broken arm, or maybe they backed up their bucket truck into a civilian vehicle, or per se, right? And it's one of those things that was due to heat illness and dehydration, or dehydration, cognitive decline, right? That caused that issue, but it's going to be recorded as something else, when really it was due to lack of hydration that caused a brain fog, right? And that's, in my opinion, what is probably the highest risk in heat cases, because oftentimes we come in and we ask companies and we say, hey, how many heat-related illnesses do you have? And they say, well, we only had one last year. And it's like, no, actually, I would imagine that you probably had a lot more. They just weren't categorized as heat cases, right? They weren't in OSHA recordable as a heat case, but somebody was in a brain fog and made a silly decision and got themselves hurt or somebody else hurt. And so it's looking at root causes, in my opinion, that really is, and more people are opening their eyes to that, which is good.
Yeah, I've had quite a few conversations about this, like the energy wheel, and thinking about hazard recognition and putting direct controls in place. And I talk a lot about it from a perspective of pain, how is pain impacting brain function? But then when you start talking about like how is hydration and heat impacting cognition and brain function and someone's ability to actually see those hazards and put the right direct controls in place, I think is a big part of this serious injury and fatality prevention framework, and that human being at the center of the energy wheel is a big part of this. Any other thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I would say, yeah, you and I are kind of cut from the same cloth as far as believing that, because I truly believe that if we could collectively get all of the trades or blue collar work, if you want to call it, industrial athletes, to pay attention to just simple things, simple manageable things like your hydration protocol, proper electrolyte replacement, soft tissue injury prevention programming, whether that be a recovery program or a stretching program or a muscular movement program, ergonomic program, whatever it may be, I think we would all quickly realize that it has so much more impact than just how many soft tissue injuries you had or how many heat illness cases you had. I truly think you would see a massive shift in safety. And in turn, a lot of these people are motivated by production, and sometimes throwing safety and compliance out the window in order to achieve production. But I think the irony behind it all is if we all had this programming and set in place in the framework of all these processes, I think you would actually elevate all of those things: safety, performance, production, and I truly think that because it's completely, it translates directly from sports, right? It's the same thing. You have that athlete that you take care of, and all of a sudden their career is 40% longer than other athletes that don't do those things, right? And they have less injuries and they have higher salaries because they're performing more and better, right? So it's the same thing. It's the same exact thing. It translates directly over to the industrial work.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great tie-in. Speaking of professional sports as well, the founder of Working Athlete, Mark Paulson, Coach P, we affectionately call him. Absolutely love the guy. We've done some collaboration with you and him on some educational series with Mossy. But tell us a little bit about Coach P. And I've heard him talk about sludge blood, and that was a new concept for me, just the terminology. But love to hear a little bit more about Coach P, how he's influenced you, and then if you could talk about sludge blood.
Yeah, Coach P kind of took me under his wing when I first started with us on the wilderness athlete side of our business, the hunting side of our business. And, I then transitioned over to the working industrial side of our business and did a bunch of trade shows with Coach. And, my dad being a coach too, it's like, okay, now I've got Coach P, who's a lifelong coach as well. And being able to just, in my opinion, just witness connecting and communicating with people and helping people understand the concept of hydration in general. And, if you've ever seen Coach P speak or you have the opportunity to, you definitely should. He's one of those guys that, being a former athlete, like I want to run through a brick wall after sitting in a presentation, and he's a charismatic guy. So yeah, a lot of shout out to Coach P for sure. And yeah, one of the things he talks about all the time is he preaches on performance and recovery better than most people, as it relates to nutrition and how you take care of your body and how it affects your recovery. Because you can only work as hard as you recover, or you can only play as well as you recover, right? Coming from the sports world, but yeah, he uses the terminology sludge blood, and essentially what that phenomenon is, it's kind of like the engine oil to your vehicle. Your blood builds up toxic waste as well, just like your oil does, right? And your oil begins to thicken from all this, metal shavings and toxic buildup, and it increases friction in your block or in your motor, and it increases pressure, and all of a sudden you blow a gasket, right? And that's because your oil is thickening, it's getting dirty, and so in order to maintain that asset, what do? You change the oil every 4 to 6 thousand miles, or if you've got a newer vehicle, I've seen some up to 8 to 10,000 miles, or whatever it is. You're changing your oil to make sure that it's remaining viscous or fluid-like or clean, because it really, as I mentioned, reduces friction, which lowers heat. A bunch of other positive things about oil lubricating the machine, right? Same thing goes for your blood, though. Your blood transports oxygenated blood to your brain to make sound decisions. It transports them down to your extremities to move your fingers, at their neurotransmitic level. And it transports electrolytes to act as conductors or connections to make sure that we're firing on all cylinders, mentally and physically. And then, obviously the natural cooling mechanism, there's a bunch of benefits of hydrated blood. But moral of the story is your blood is on average around 40 to 50% water. And what happens when you aren't on a proper hydration protocol is you stress the fluidity or viscosity of your blood, and it actually thickens. And it makes it harder and harder to pump through your body up to your brain, to your extremities. And that's why when you go through a dehydrative state or heat stress, you feel like your heart's about to pound out of its chest, because it's having to work so hard to maintain, and it's trying to cool your body through thermoregulation and trying to get blood up to the brain to make sure we're still firing on all cylinders, right? And it just has to work so much harder. And that's where the terminology sludge blood comes from. It's because it turns into sludge, turns into gunk where it just doesn't want to move, and your circulation decreases. And there's so many, negative side effects of poor circulation in general. But as it relates to natural cooling mechanism or moving your extremities, it can be very dangerous being an industrial athlete.
Yeah, and even beyond circulation, one of the ways that I oftentimes describe dehydration is hydration levels are really important for our lymphatic system as well. And our lymphatic system is basically that's like the sewer system of your body. It's like flushing all the toxins, getting all the junk out of your cells. When we exercise, when we work, or are physically active, it produces a waste byproduct in our body, and our body has to send that through the lymphatic system, get it to our kidneys, flush it out. And I oftentimes tell people, if your driveway's dirty, are you going to pressure wash, or are you going to wash it with a garden hose or a pressure washer? And if you have a pressure washer, you can get that junk out of there. But if you have a garden hose, it's going to be a lot harder. And so when we have that sludge blood, I think that's a great way for people to think about it. It's just there's less hydrostatic pressure that is going through your body to clear stuff out. And so again, you talk a lot about this, that dehydration not only affects your brain, and it's not much, you might want to correct me here, but I think it's 2% dehydration impacts cognitive function. But there was a study that also showed that 1% dehydration, which isn't much. I mean, for the average person, if you're 200 pounds, it's like, 1% dehydration is like 32 ounces of water that you're dehydrated, which that can happen pretty quickly. I mean, we can lose 32 ounces in an hour in certain conditions. That increases our risk of developing a musculoskeletal injury. So it changes the structure of the muscle, the tendons. They become less resilient to stress. And so there is definitely a correlation between muscle strain, injury to tendons, ligaments, in those type of settings. Can you talk a little bit more about how dehydration impacts soft tissues as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know whenever we were, in my previous job, working with athletes, I mean, hydration was like number one priority, because, your muscle tissue is up to 80% water. And I like to use the analogy of a sponge. You just take a dishwashing sponge or car wash sponge, doesn't matter, a sponge, and you take a dried out sponge and you try and move it, and it doesn't want to move through functional patterns, right? It doesn't want to really move at all. It's kind of rigid, it's stiff, it's a little more prone to maybe like a tear or a break, or it just doesn't seem like it wants to move, right? It doesn't seem healthy. And you take that same sponge and you dunk it in a bucket of water or a sink, and all of a sudden that there's life in that sponge, and it's able to bend and move without heightened risk of tears, right? And that same thing goes on in your muscle tissues daily. And you hear people in the trades of all these aches and pains and these things and joints, and as you mentioned, how that affects your ability to concentrate and perform, pain tolerance, etc. So yeah, the musculoskeletal, or the soft tissue injury approach to hydration, in my opinion, I mean, we know it makes up close to 40% of all injuries in the trades. And to me, it's just so obvious. It's like, hey, everybody, listen, look at the sports world. They focus on these things because they know it affects their performance and injury resiliency, right? It's the same thing that over here in the trades that we should be doing too. Now, we don't have as much, I guess you could say attention. Like, we don't have trainers on the sidelines. There are, luckily there's some job sites that have physical trainers on jobs, and, on-site health and safety teams. And, that it's amazing how far we've come. But, it's one of those things where injury prevention as it relates to soft tissues I think, can be addressed first with hydration. You pay attention on getting on a sound hydration protocol, and then let's work into some actual ergonomic and, musculoskeletal release programming that can allow your body to actually perform at its highest capacity. And in turn, you're going to feel better. If you feel better, you're going to perform stronger.
A few months ago, Vomosity, my company, and Working Athlete collaborated on a video series on heat safety and hydration. We'll definitely add a link into the show notes so that people can access some of that content. But I may butcher this. Is it the Galpin equation? Is that did I say that right? Yeah.
Dr. Galpin.
Can you talk about that? Because I think it's a great way for people to think about how to pace their hydration levels over the course of the day. So what is kind of a rule of thumb when it comes to hydration?
Yeah, I mean, most people in a normal lifestyle, they say about half your body weight in ounces would be typical structure.
And that's no heat, just like regular at rest. Yeah.
That's like at rest in your home, minimum.
Yeah.
Is what
If you weigh 200 pounds, you should be drinking 100 ounces.
Right.
Okay.
Now,
okay, gotcha.
That's like on the low end for most people. The closest, I guess I would say the closest to the gold standard of recommendation for hydration, I think it's the most transferable to everybody, is the Galpin equation. I heard this on a Dr. Huberman podcast, and it just really hit home with me. And it's you take your body weight and you divide that by 30. Whatever number that gives you is how many ounces you should have every 20 minutes during work in a perfect world. Now, we don't live in a perfect world, but we can all strive to achieve as close as we can to that. And what that means is I'm 210 pounds, divide that by 30, that's 7. I should be having about 7 ounces of water every 20 minutes during work. And if you start doing the math, that's 21 ounces every hour. That's about a bottle and a half. Your typical water bottle is 15.9 ounces, 16 ounces. So you can call it a bottle and a half per hour during work. And that can change so much from person to person. But as far as is gold standard or rule as possible, recommendation, that's a great framework to work off of, because then from there you can hone in on your individual needs. And it takes personal ownership here too. It takes you understanding, okay, yeah, you know what? I may be on a medication that actually holds on to all my salts, or I'm on a medication that excretes all of my water and salts, right? You need to know these things because your employer, they may not know that. And if you're being treated the same as the person next to you that is the complete opposite as far as conditions, that can be a heightened risk as well. So we need to make sure that we understand those type of things. But yeah, back to your question, Galpin equation is probably the best one to offer for everyone. And the whole point of that is it's like using the terminal or the analogy of a 24-hour drizzle rain versus a 2 to 4 minute downpour monsoon. Which one's going to saturate the soil more? Which one gets a deep rooted moisture? And we can all agree that a 24-hour drizzle is going to be better for saturation. And that's the same thing that goes for your cells. Your cellular hydration is what you should be paying attention to. And oftentimes, what do? Oh man, I'm thirsty. And it's boom, I'm going to slam 32 ounces of water. And then it triggers your urinary response, and you urinate a lot of it out, and there's no saturation. So we need to just make sure we have a strategy and plan to offer a saturated approach to your hydration. And, you're going to get true cellular hydration through that process.
Yeah, that's such a great example of, the drizzle versus the downpour. And I mean, I teach this stuff all day long, and, I would still guzzle water. I do a lot of like long distance triathlons, and so it would be, pound at 16 ounces and just realize that it's just going through my system and it's not being absorbed. So I think that guzzle versus, 7 ounces, just slow, steady throughout the day is such a big difference. Talking about electrolytes too, because most people, when they think about electrolytes, they think of sodium, chloride, potassium. It's like, oh, eat a banana and you're going to be good. But let's talk about some of the other really critical, minerals, electrolytes, different components of hydration that are really critical for cell function. Love to hear more about that.
Yeah, electrolytes, a lot of times people don't realize that they're essentially salts, right? And your body demands them because they carry positive and negative charges throughout the body. And, we want balance in those too, because, too much of one thing, it creates imbalance, and you want to have that balanced connectivity. And, this is where, as we talk about ownership, in a perfect world, everybody would be getting all their vitamins and minerals from their natural diet and water that they're drinking. But that's not the world we live in anymore. We live in a convenient, demanded lifestyle where we never stop. We're on our phones and we're working, and now you've got AI, and it's just never stopping. And you just, unfortunately, what takes a toll is our diets and our nutrition and electrolytes in general. We need to have conductivity at the neurotransmitic level to move your fingers and your feet and your extremities and make decisions. And they act as conductors or connectors in order to do that. And what happens when you don't have enough of them is you've got arcs, right? Or you've got zero connectivity. And that's where muscle spasms kick in, or brain fog kicks in, or, another thing it would be hyponatremia on the other side of the spectrum. Is you've got people that are, all I drink is water. It's not the same as it was 40 years ago. You take water out of a faucet 40 years ago and take it out now due to chlorinating and cleaning, having to clean water through that process, it strips the vitamins and minerals from your natural water. It's not the same as it was 40 years ago. Because it loses efficacy whenever you have to clean the water. And what people don't realize is that water is not the same. That's why you go to the gas station and there's 30 kinds of water at the gas station, right? And it's one of those things that when it comes to water-only people, a very big danger to that is you can flood out your salts. You can actually dilute your salts so much, and this is very dangerous because it mimics dehydration almost to a T as far as the symptoms. And so you'll have somebody that will be going through the same symptoms as dehydration, and will naturally say, you need to drink more water. And they'll intake more water and continue to dilute their salts, which is just as dangerous as not having enough salts, right? And that causes very, very, very bad issues because you think you're hydrating and you're actually making the problem worse. You're actually flooding your own system out. So, yeah, that can be very dangerous as well. But it's one of those things where electrolytes, we got to try and find balance.
That's great. I appreciate that. I wear my Whoop every day, so I'm constantly looking at my recovery, especially first thing in the morning, heart rate variability and sleep quality, resting heart rate, stuff like that. And then I also do a lot of blood testing, urinalysis. Twice a year, I do pretty in-depth testing. When I started that, which was about 2 years ago, my vitamin D levels, zinc levels, magnesium levels were like hardly even showed up on, on the test. Like I was so depleted in all three of those. And I was really struggling with my recovery and heart rate variability. My recovery scores were really low. Once I started supplementing with vitamin D, magnesium, zinc, especially before bed, and paying attention to some of these other minerals that you talked about, I really started to see a positive trend in my recovery. And then over the last year, the last two tests, things have started to normalize, and it definitely has had an impact. Can you talk about magnesium, zinc, and vitamin D, and just the importance of having those either in your diet or through the hydration that you consume?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, zinc and magnesium are probably the most widely deficient in minerals in most people's diets. Unfortunately, they're not found in convenience foods. Oftentimes, they're usually found in like green, leafy, healthier stuff on the outside of the grocery stores, and um, it's one of those things where I think I forget what it was, what the exact number is, but or zinc plays over 400 processes throughout the body that zinc is responsible for, or at least involved with. And 80% of Americans are chronically deficient in zinc or something like that. And it's just one of those things that you don't know until you know, like you said. And if you aren't tracking data, how do you ever expect to make improvements? This, obviously coming from like strength training, right? I'm working with an athlete right now actually, and he's trying to build weight for his senior year of football, and he's complaining, I can't gain weight, I can't do this. And I said, well, do you even know what your measurables are? Do you even know, like, are you tracking how much protein you're taking in a day? No, I don't really know. Well, how do you expect to actually make improvements if you don't know? And that's oftentimes with like magnesium and zinc, right, or vitamin D. People don't know that they're deficient in these things until, like you said, you get tested. You go above and beyond to get tested and find out and hone in on it. But yeah, it's one of those things people don't realize how good you can feel until you supplement things that you're deficient in. And as I've said before, I always will encourage people to get everything from your natural diet if possible. Because it's the most bioavailable, and the efficacy of it's so much higher than most supplements. Depending on which grade of supplements you're sourcing. But there's no better way to get those same minerals that you're discussing than getting them from a natural source. But in today's society and world, if you find out you are deficient, supplementing with a high quality bioavailable supplement or vitamin is, there's a lot of great ways to do that these days.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point too, because I think with the physical demands that a lot of the workforce has, or if you know, physically train from an athletic standpoint, you are going to probably have to supplement,
Yeah.
and also think about different things. Part of the the thing that I was experiencing was like muscle cramps at night, and I was like having trouble like calming down, just realizing that magnesium was a big
Yes.
part of that equation,
Yep.
especially with the sleep and calming down my autonomic nervous system. And so again, that's one area that I eat a ton of green leafy vegetables and good sources of zinc and magnesium, but realizing that I needed some supplementation to help out with that was really big. And a lot of people are like, well, I'm cramping, I should have potassium, which is part of the equation, but there are other components there. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
magnesium and zinc definitely is another area that I think people should look into. And again, having blood tests or biomarkers, things that you can actually use to measure that so that you can track it. You can't manage what you don't measure, and so I think that
Yep.
that's a really important part of that. Can you talk about branch chain
Yeah.
amino acids and the importance of that as well when it comes to cellular recovery and function?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing to piggyback with what you just did before I talked BCAAs is the importance of magnesium. It's that relaxing, like you said. It allows your body to relax, your muscle tissues to relax, and that's all that cramping is just over constricting, over firing muscle tissues, right? And that magnesium actually allows your muscle tissue to relax, and that's why it does enhance with sleep and irritability, etc. Right? So yeah, also magnesium, it's the activating or um, carrying electrolyte. It actually, if you have an electrolyte product that does not contain magnesium, they actually say that sodium and potassium completely loses its efficacy because magnesium actually bridges the barrier or gap at the cellular level to pull in the sodium and potassium. And a lot of people don't realize that. Magnesium plays such a vital role to transporting those other electrolytes. So, extremely key to make sure that you are at your proper level of magnesium, and make sure magnesium is present in your electrolyte or replacement product because you're that transporting electrolyte. BCAAs, building blocks. BCAAs are building blocks of protein, branch chain amino acids. Um, I won't go too far in depth with like specific ones or like L-leucine or there's a ton. We could dive into more, but just to keep it generally speaking, I like to explain them like little bricks to your wall, right? BCAAs are like bricks that you're stacking and mortaring and putting together, and um, we like to say the vitamin C is like the mortar to your wall, right? So we always say maintaining a high quality zinc and vitamin C uh, diet or supplement with a solid BCAA in your diet as well it makes you more resilient, right? Because you're building this strong, strengthened wall. And those BCAAs, as I mentioned, are those actual building blocks to your muscle tissue. As it relates to industrial athletes, you're doing a physically demanding job, and unfortunately, you aren't ever recovering your muscle tissue most of the time. And that starts with a recovery program, of course, but also replacing what you're damaging. And you can only replace what you're damaging by giving it the fuel that it needs. And BCAAs are precursors to the protein synthesis process or rebuilding process. So BCAAs are so important to recovery and muscle management.
Where do people get BCAAs naturally in food, and when is it appropriate to supplement or maybe have that in something that you're drinking from a hydration standpoint?
Yeah, absolutely. BCAAs oftentimes you can find BCAAs where you're sourcing protein. But also it's the supplement world there's a lot of fraud in the supplement world. So you have to do your own research and find supplements that work for you, right? We're in our hunting side of our business has been the supplement space for 24 years, and we will be the first ones to tell you we may not be for you. You may find one that actually is more bioavailable to your body, that absorbs better with your particular body, right? So I would just highly suggest that if you're going to go the supplement route with BCAAs, which oftentimes you have to in today's world because Even sources of meat, they say, don't offer the same bioavailability for BCAAs and protein as they used to due to overprocessed foods, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if you are supplementing, we would just highly suggest, finding one that works for you, because you'll know if you're consistently offering your body the fuel that it needs and it's making itself available to your recovery process, you're going to feel it. You're going to feel better. You're probably going to start seeing a difference in your muscle tissue. But yeah, the supplement space, as far as suggestions and BCAAs, I would just make sure that you're doing your research to find out what works best for you. But most individuals, due to the society we live in, would absolutely benefit from a high quality branched chain amino acid supplement.
You mentioned that there's a lot of fraud, which I totally agree in the supplement space. I mean, I look at some of the stuff and I'm like, oh my gosh, how is this stuff even on the market? What are some of the warning signs that people should look for that a supplement may not be of the right quality, purity? And then on the other side, what are some things to look for when it comes to choosing a brand of a supplement?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, oftentimes, you can look at the reputation. I mean, most of the time you can try and trust reviews, right? But at the end of the day, there's so many bots out there too, where you don't even know what reviews are real or not. So, doing your own research to look at the how long a company's been around or the reputation that they have, but also there's certain information out there as far as where they're sourcing ingredients from. Are they getting them from a massive supplement farm that essentially they're just a marketing brand that's white labeling supplements and saying they're a supplement nutrition industry, company, and overproduction of those supplement farms typically, it can be a lower grade source of ingredients that they use. So I would just say do your own research. There's really not like very visible warning signs, but I would just say know your body too. And like you said, you can't manage what you don't measure. So if you're taking a supplement, you should have some sort of accountability measure to make sure that what you're taking is doing something, whether that be a qualitative measurement or a quantitative measurement. Are you feeling better? Generally speaking, then there's placebo effect there, I guess you could say a little bit, but there's also things that you can track measurably, right? Or quantitatively, like as far as like if you're an athlete and you're maxing out and all of a sudden you started taking creatine or branched chain amino acids and you find out that your max went up 40 pounds in 6 weeks. It's like, okay, this stuff's probably pretty good as far as the efficacy and bioavailability of these ingredients, right? Obviously there's some other variables there, but you'll know because you should feel better and you should be performing stronger most of the time if it's something that you're deficient in.
Double clicking on creatine, I remember playing sports in the 1990s. Everyone was trying to bulk up, and people would do creatine loading. I was definitely one of those people. I had no idea what I was doing. It was just the thing to do. You go to GNC, you get a huge, massive tub of it, and you're, throwing stuff into protein shakes. But let's talk about creatine real quick, because I do think that more and more research has come out over the last few years about it, and just it's something that we could pretty much all benefit from, and it doesn't matter what age. Can you talk about some of the more recent research that validates how creatine not only is good for muscle development and cellular health, but also even cognitive function?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's one of those things, like you said, it's the most well-researched and probably widely used supplement ever. And it actually kind of came from muscular dystrophy that they started using creatine, and then it got commercialized into bodybuilding, right? And then everybody was taking creatine, and then it got a bad rap because of issues with kidneys and et cetera. But there's over the last few years, there's been a ton of research around creatine and the benefits of athletic and fitness performance. But then, as you mentioned, actually improved brain function. And there's actually a bunch of research out there that it may actually positively impact cognitive function, and especially due to people that maybe aren't getting enough sleep, or maybe they're in high stressed environments, or maybe they're constantly feel like they're in a mental fog or brain fog. It can actually improve, they say it can improve your memory, focus, and it can reduce the amount of mental fatigue that you're going through. And I will say this, myself, I took creatine in high school a lot and through college, and then I just stopped. And then the last probably 12 months or so to 18 months, we actually launched a creatine ourselves. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to get back on it. And I will tell you this, my mental sharpness, what I noticed was a lot more in tune whenever I was on creatine. And I think it's just because it actually, creatine in general is, it helps produce or regenerate ATP, which is, obviously your primary energy source for, the mostly high intense type stuff, but it does impact just your normal energy as well. And I felt like I could feel that drastically. And then, as far as the gym and my performance and fitness, it was hands down like a complete shift whenever I got back on creatine. So yeah, my personal encouragement would be to explore creatine and do it in a safe quantity. There's plenty of information out there. I'm not here to tell you how much to do or not. There's people that are saying you can take up to 10 grams a day safely. Most of them err on the side of like 2 to 5. So we would just say, do your own research. But I can tell you firsthand that my cognitive mental focus is improved just as much as my physical performance has.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And then, we would be remiss to not mention protein and give people some guidance on that. Can you talk about some of the general principles related to how much protein people should take? Again, physically active people, protein is absolutely the building block of recovery, muscular health. Everything involves protein. And I think for a lot of people out there, we're probably not getting enough. I know that protein is the number, like when I think about food choices, I'm always thinking about how to get protein in every single meal that I have over the course of the day. But can you talk a little bit more about just general recommendations?
Yeah, absolutely. Protein, in my opinion, in today's society is neglected so much. And it can vary on what you need based on, what you're trying to achieve. If you're looking to, be building, say you're an athlete and you're looking to be putting on muscle per se, they actually say that you should have around 1 to even upwards of 1.5 grams of protein per pound, which is crazy to think about because, you start tracking your protein, it's like, wow, okay, getting 225 grams of protein is pretty hard. But, with supplementation, it can be achieved, and with focus, it can be achieved. But, in general, generally speaking, for non-athletes or non-fitness, muscle building, bulking people, we don't need, a gram of protein per pound. Most people, you're looking at, half a gram to, 3/4 of a gram or 0.7 grams per pound of body weight for most people to maintain your muscle mass. But, I would say, generally speaking, for the industrial worker, if you don't replace what you're breaking down, you're going to continually be in this deficit. That's going to increase physical fatigue. So you want to have more protein than a sedentary person or somebody that works at an office job. So I would encourage people to stay right around a pound, or I'm sorry, 1 gram of protein per pound in order to maintain and not, get a heightened risk of physical fatigue.
We started out this conversation with you talking about planning for success, and a lot of times, people, they're out the door first thing in the morning. Maybe they don't bring food with them, and they're like, "Oh, I'll stop and I'll get a good lunch." But then, their schedule gets cramped, and it's like it's another gas station meal for them, or a gas station snack, and it's pretty tempting to pick, just something off the shelf that maybe isn't high in protein, or high quality, has a ton of preservatives or maybe a ton of sugar in it. Can you talk about some things that people can do to prepare to have protein ready and available when they're working before they leave? But then if they're, out and about, they have to stop in a gas station. What are some good tips that you can provide people with for sources of high protein snacks?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the biggest challenges I think in blue collar or industrial work is the time demand and the schedule that you're on. It's so difficult to stay on top of your nutrition, and unfortunately, like we said, commercially and I guess in society, you're just marketed to not be making the right choices, and it's so much easier to run through the drive through or to stop by the gas station and just get things that aren't nutritionally sound for you. But yeah, some basic things would just be preparation. Trying to maybe put together um, some macro, balanced snacks trays, or have some cheese and salami and maybe a few pretzels or something like that, just to get some good high quality macronutrition in your diet throughout the day. It's going to be so much better than slamming a cheeseburger and just hoping that you're going to get by. It will give you some natural, quick response energy, but oftentimes it's not going to be solid fuel. It's not going to be sustainable fuel. And, your energy production, it relies so much on high quality protein and high quality fats and carbohydrates, complex carbohydrates. And, having a plan to, hey, you know what, I'm going to run by Sam's and I'm going to get some protein bars for the week, or I'm going to get, like I mentioned, maybe some snack packs. On Sunday, I'm going to pack up some snack packs for me to keep in my cooler, right? It's inconvenient. It's not the cool thing to do, but you will absolutely feel better. And in turn, you're probably going to have a more enjoyable life because you're going to be feeling better.
Yeah, and one thing that I would say too is watch for like the sneaky ingredients in some of those high protein snacks too, that over time, like, you just keep eating them over and over again. I would say that preservatives are probably one of the number one things I see, like especially in a lot of the beef jerkies and meat sticks. It's like MSG, sodium nitrite, like all these different preservatives that probably are not that great for you as well. Tons of sugar in some of that stuff that, you just don't realize how much sugar you're actually consuming in some of those products that seem like they would be healthy. So yeah, I would say that just watching that stuff as well is important. Dylon, man, we've learned so much. This has been a great conversation. Before we close things out, just want to hear some more personal thoughts from you, just in terms of like what you do. I mean, it's one thing to recommend stuff, but what are the things that you do, like for a pre-shift or a pre-workout meal or snack? Would love to
Yeah.
hear some of your ideas on that.
Yeah, definitely. I'm human, so one of the things I think why we relate so well to people when we go train is like, hey, I'm human as well. I make mistakes. I have a beer every now and then. I eat my cheeseburgers. It's one of those things where you've got to have balance in life. And whatever your balance is, you need to find that balance. But try and live as 80/20 as possible. because it impacts so much more. And my motivation is like, I want to be around for my grandkids, and I want to be able to still be physical and maybe do some hunts still, and fishing trips and camping and being able to throw the ball around. I want to be able to do that as long as I can. And I want to be able to enjoy my hobbies as long as I can. And as it relates to being, in the workplace, is you want to be able to, after your trade, still be able to do that, because you're at an increased um, environment to actually, you're up against it more than normal people. So I would just say myself in general is, if I do not plan, I will not succeed. I have to have things prepped for me. Luckily, my wife owns a meal prep business, so I'm pretty spoiled. I have meal preps that are usually stocked in the fridge, and they're just easy grab and go. But unfortunately, I fall into that trap all the time of, "Oh, I don't want to have to make this and put it together and do all this stuff." And as humans, we make the mistake of reaching for the convenience. And convenience, that's not built for our success most of the time. So yeah, I would just say developing a plan. I could tell you my pre-workout or morning routine is 3/4 of a cup of whole fat Greek yogurt, plain Greek yogurt with some raw honey and maybe some fruit. So I'm getting high quality nutrition there. And then I really, really try and stay on about a 1.25 to 1.5 grams of protein per pound for myself. Because I feel like when I don't, I'll wake up in the mornings groggy. I won't be recovered. My energy production's completely depleted. And I'm constantly living in that deficit. So I got to make sure that I keep my fuel up in order to stay performing.
You're crushing that protein, man. That's good. That's a challenge to get that much
I try
protein.
to.
Yeah.
Well, luckily, I work for a nutritional company, so I I have a monthly stipend of protein shakes, which is nice.
Love it. What are your go-to recovery techniques? You still train, lift, do all that. So maybe even just, overall recovery. What are your go-tos?
Yeah, I mean, the number one modalities of recovery is sleep. And, through this season of my life, it's been more difficult to achieve that with, two Irish twin daughters. And it's just that season where you catch sleep when you get it, right? And but sleep is so important. 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night has so much impact on your recovery. And it's hard to recover your body if you aren't giving it rest. And so, yeah, sleep would be number one. And then obviously myofascial release, whether that be foam rolling or stick work or, lacrosse ball, trigger point release, that type of stuff is very key to maintaining a pliable body. But, in normal stretching, as much as I despise it, my body feels so much better whenever I work through functional movement patterns. And, I know these things. And that's the thing, is it's such a challenge that I know these things and I still neglect it at times. So it's one of those things where I understand, and I can sympathize with people that don't come from this world, and how alienated they can feel when you try and implement these programs and processes into their daily lives, right? So yeah, it's important for us to just try and be 1% better every day. Even if it's taking 1 minute to stretch tomorrow morning, and then maybe by the end of the year, you're up to 30 minutes, and you're listening to a leadership podcast or a motivational podcast at the same time, right? Now you're double dipping. So just doing things incrementally and letting it compound over time is extremely key.
Awesome. I love that. And Irish twin daughters, you've got your hands full right now. My boys are 13 and 15, so I'm well past that, but I remember those days. One thing that I want to compliment on you is that, more and more research is showing that the impact of positive relationships and community on overall health and stress. And I mean, I've been at line rodeos where you've got the whole family there, and you're taking them with you when you're on the road, and you're on the road a lot. But just I think you do such a good job prioritizing family and putting that first. So just want to give you a shout out for that. Dylan, how are you learning and growing right now? What podcasts and books are you listening to?
Yeah, one of the books that I had written down was Everyone Communicates and Few Connect by John
Hmm.
C. Maxwell.
Yep.
I love Maxwell's stuff, his leadership stuff, and it's one of those things where it's completely right, right? Everybody communicates, and you actually connect with people, and when you connect with people, you establish trust, and when you can establish trust, that's when a lot of great things can happen. And as you mentioned, I'm technically in the world of sales and commodity sales at that, and it can be very difficult if you don't have the ability to build relationships with people and help them understand their why and why these things are important. So yeah, I mean, that's one of the ones I had written down. But I am a monthly listener to the Craig Rochelle Leadership Podcast.
Love
I
that.
absolutely love Craig Rochelle for many reasons, but also his leadership podcast is just phenomenal. He brings on amazing people. Obviously, he comes from the world of Christianity. He has Life Church all across the world, etc. But his leadership podcast isn't like a religious podcast. He kind of just brings on business leaders, thought leaders, and they just talk all things leadership. And I really kind of nerd out and gig out on leadership stuff because being a father and a thought leader as it relates to how much people I get to talk to and speak to, being able to share more than just heat illness procedures is why I do what I do.
I love that. And John Maxwell, he says leadership is influence, and I think that's such a great definition of what leadership is. And we all have influence, and so that by default makes us all leaders in some way. And so, yeah, highly recommend him. I would say that his work has had a profound impact on my life and my leadership. And Craig Rochelle, man, I listen to his podcast every single month, and so definitely would second that. What is your personal mantra or motto that keeps you motivated?
Um, Mine would probably just be, in general, I come from a very strong family that's deeply rooted in faith, and I don't take that very lightly. I grew up around very strong men, and I believe in having strong men in community and in family. Um, and I would probably say that probably the most important part of my life is being that to my daughters, and then obviously with my wife as well. So yeah, I would just say family in general is just so important to me, and why I do the things I do, and why I'm passionate about the things that I'm passionate about.
Yeah, I love that. Comes through in everything that you do and say. Dylan, final question here. What is your definition of being work ready? This is the Work Ready podcast. How do you think about being work ready, and what would you like to leave our guests with?
Yeah, I think being work ready is essentially building in enough margin uh, or capacity to make sure that when things go south, that you're still going to go home safely, and you're still it's not going to turn into a serious injury or something worse. So I think what that means is paying attention to your physical readiness, your mental readiness, right? Because all of those things are going to impact the environment and situation that you're working in. And as everybody fails safely, right? Failing forward, essentially, we want to make sure that you are cut in and mentally and physically fit to perform your work safely. And because we want you to go home and be able to enjoy the things you want to enjoy.
I love that. Dylan, man, so good to spend this time with you. Just appreciate who you are as a person, husband, father, leader in this industry. Thank you for sharing all this knowledge with us. We're all better because of it. How can people find you outside of this podcast?
Yeah, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. You can just look up Dylon Koch on there. It's Koch. A working athlete is also on there on LinkedIn. And then, my email address is very simple. It's just my first name, Dylon, Dylon, at workingathlete.com. I'd be more than happy to connect with anybody that's interested and maybe expand on some topics that we discussed.
Awesome. We'll put that in the show notes, but really appreciate this time. Thank you everyone who has joined this. Again, we so appreciate the work that you do, your commitment to keeping the lights on, building the buildings that allow us to function, the roads that allow us to drive on. We want to be able to enjoy the things that we do in life without the men and women who do the work with their hands. And so we're so appreciative of that. And I just want to leave everyone with the thought that you are worth investing in. I think it's so important to remember that you're a gift to the world. And when you take care of yourself and you invest in yourself, you become a better version of yourself, a healthier, happier, more resilient person. And again, leadership is influence. We all influence other people, and we can really have a profound impact. So thank you so much for joining the Work Ready podcast. Can't wait for our next conversation. And thanks again, Dylon. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Kevin. Nice talking to you.